Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. The US says it is working with the international community to continue humanitarian assistance to the Afghan people. Speaking in Doha at a press conference alongside Qatari Foreign Minister and US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington believes around 100 American citizens, many of them dual nationals, are still in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the UN says basic services in Afghanistan are collapsing while food and other aid is starting to run out. Pakistan is observing Air Force Day with patriotic zeal today. The day is celebrated to relive the memory of 1965 war when Pakistani pilots inflicted humiliating defeat on India. Special events are being organized to pay homage to war heroes. In India, thousands of farmers have gathered in Haryana to pressure the government to repeal controversial agriculture laws. Authorities had imposed restrictions on gatherings and snapped internet services ahead of the protest. A nationwide strike is also planned on 27th of September to protest against the laws, which farmers say will jeopardize their livelihoods. Israeli fighter jets have launched air raids on the Gaza Strip, violating the May ceasefire with Hamas yet again. In a tweet, Israeli army claimed to have struck a military compound and a rocket manufacturing site belonging to Hamas. It said the attack in the vicinity of Khan Yunis city was in response to alleged incendiary balloons launched from the strip. Mexico has reported over 300 daily COVID-19 deaths and more than 5,000 infections in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered nearly 100 new COVID-19 fatalities and over 3,300 cases in the last 24 hours. Globally, the COVID-19 caseload has topped 221 million, while the death toll has reached over 4.57 million. And in tennis, world number one Novak Djokovic scrapped his way to a 1-6, 6-3, 6-2 and 6-2 win over Jenson Brooksby to move into the US Open quarterfinals. Meanwhile, fourth-seeded Alexander Zverev also stormed to the next round by beating Yannick Sinner 6-4, 6-4 and 7-6. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. The US says it is working with the international community to continue humanitarian assistance to the Afghan people. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin were addressing a press conference alongside the Qatari counterparts in Doha.
Blinken said Washington believes there are still around 100 American citizens in Mazar-e-Sharif. He said the US is working to ensure charter flights carrying US citizens and at-risk Afghans can leave Afghanistan safely. But Blinken said Taliban officials had told the US they will let people with travel documents freely depart Afghanistan. For his part, Qatar's foreign minister said the Kabul airport will hopefully be running for passengers in the next few days. However, he said no agreement on how to run the Kabul airport has yet been reached. Meanwhile, the UN says basic services in Afghanistan are collapsing while food and other aid is starting to run out. At a press briefing, spokesperson Jens Lark said Lark called for food and humanitarian assistance.
Pakistan is observing Air Force Day with patriotic zeal today. The day is celebrated to mark the memory of the 1965 war when Pakistani pilots inflicted humiliating defeat on India. The Indian Air Force launched a clandestine attack on Lahore at Burki border, but it failed miserably after valiant resistance by military officers like Major Raja Aziz Bhatti Shaheed. PF pilot Mohammad Mahmood Alam shot down 5 Indian Air Force Hawker Hunter fighters in less than a minute. He became history's only jet ace in a day in 100 years history of the world aircraft. On this occasion, special events are being organized to pay homage to the war heroes. As Pakistan honors its armed forces and martyrs of the war, former squadron leader Akbar Ghani recalls the Wagah mission with Indus News. More in this report by our correspondent Manahil Ahmed.
हम पर बेदरेर जारहाना हमला किया तो हमने उसके चैलेंज का जवाब देने के लिए सफ़ें बांध दी.
As tensions escalated in 1965, Indian Army General Chaudhary boasted about the fall of Lahore and to have a drink in Lahore Gymkhana. A day later, the team that squadron leader Akbar Ghani was a part of learned that they were to provide ground support to Wagah as Indian soldiers had crossed the border.
We went straight to Lahore, descended over Shalimar Garden, and followed the road to Wagah border. We were about 500 feet, looking right and left if they were there, and we couldn't find them. So from there, we just turned on the GT road, and Amritsar is very near. We went near Amritsar and we saw the AK guns, because Amritsar radar is there. The AK gun, so this is Amritsar, we turned back. Again on the road.
They witnessed movement of Indian troops on the northwest of Wagah. Flight leader Syed Sajjad Haider then gave orders to choose their targets and hit the enemy.
As we came on the border, about 3 miles to the northwest of Wagah, there were tracks in the field. As soon as we went over them, we saw the saffron roundel. And the leader called in abusive language, like the fighter, here they are, the SOBs. So 5, 6, go 5,000 feet for cap and 4 hard guns and let's go for it. Whenever, the attack was made, we see a lot of fire coming out. All the recoilless guns were destroyed. Pattern tanks were there. They were all incapacitated.
He also recalled how the Indian forces ran away following the attack by the Pakistan Air Force.
The officer commanding, he saw that, things were not good and people were being killed and all those. There was uprising within his battalion. So he deserted. He ran away. And he has written in his book that when he ended up in the fort in Amritsar, he was only with 1 sock and 1 shoe. His number 2, when he saw the officer commanding has run away, so he followed suit. He also ran back to Amritsar, but he got a cycle from somewhere.
After the 1965 war, Akbar was awarded with Sitare-e-Jurrat, the country's 3rd highest military award. The 83-year-old veteran says if needed, he will be again at service for his country. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Earlier defense analyst, Air Marshal retired Masood Akhtar was our guest in studios with my fellow anchor Munib Hamid.
Now, Pakistan is observing Air Force Day with patriotic zeal today, and the day is celebrated to relive the memory of 1965 war when Pakistani pilots inflicted humiliating defeat on India. Now, to talk more about this, we have with us Air Marshal retired Masood Akhtar. So, welcome to Indus News. Now, tell us what lessons were learned from the air war of 1965?
Big ones. I think number 1, that when you have good leadership, and Noor Khan was an Iron Man. He led from the front, he demanded discipline from his air warriors, and he had trained them very well. And to top it all, his strategy was good. He decided to preempt. Air Marshal Arjun Singh was his colleague from the erstwhile pre-partition Indian Air Force, and I think he competed very well. And his pilots, people like late Rafiqi, Yunus, Middlecourt, Cecil Chaudhary, Alauddin Butch Ahmed, Air Commodore Sajjad Haider presently, and then he was a squadron leader. When they flew on the 6th, and before that on 1st of September, they had written a tale of excellence and bravado and courage and guts and grit, which has very few parallels. And when we look at the quotations about the 65 war, generally when they talk of The overall war, we think it was a stalemate. But people like Chuck Yeager, people like Chuck Horner, Chuck Yeager, who was the first one to go supersonic in the world in the X-1, and Chuck Horner, who was the JFAC, Joint Air Force Component Commander in Gulf War I, they have nothing but praise for Pakistan Air Force. Chuck Horner says during Gulf War I, he was only scared of the Iraqi pilots who were trained by the Pakistanis. When the Pakistanis, because they're thinking people, when the Pakistanis told them that, look, they are being controlled on the radar by an archaic control system, he said he took a sigh of relief, that now it is not going to be any problem. But if somebody gave him a difficulty during Gulf War I, these were the pilots who were trained by the likes of Rafiki and Yunus and Cecil Chaudhry and Middlecourt. And in fact, in 71, the traditions that they left behind, a single number 14 squadron with 14 to 16 aeroplanes, flew against, you know how many squadrons? 13. 13 fighter squadrons means 13 into 16, something like 160, 200 aeroplanes. So 14 versus 160 to 200 aeroplanes, and they had a kill ratio again of 1:3. In 65 war also, we had a kill ratio of 1:345. And the numbers, Indian Air Force was something like 700 frontline combat aeroplanes, and ours were 260. So a force larger than 1/3 plus 3 times the Pakistan Air Force. Noor Khan had an edge, and he won air superiority right on 1st September when the war was not on. And on 1st of September, late Rafiki and Flight Lieutenant Imtiaz Bhatti, they shot 2 vampires each over Cham Jodiyan, right over River Tavi, where the armor, Indian armor and Pakistani armor was bumper to bumper. And you know what they did? They wrote off a big flight of Oregons, which was a French aeroplane, and the vampires, and something like 160 to 200 aeroplanes were taken out of the fight. So 1/3 of the Indian Air Force was taken out on 1st of September just because Rafiki and Imtiaz Bhatti Saab shot 2 aeroplanes each, and they said vampires and Oregons will not be able to survive the war. So that was the kind of feat of leadership, of courage, grit, and training and discipline.
Wow, this is unbelievable to believe, but the fact is Pakistan Air Force has proven its mettle whenever it is tested now. How did the air war affect the outcome of the conflict?
Well, the air war, we had air superiority, relative air superiority. Let us not forget that the Indian Air Force also is a professional air force. They also flew low altitude, 150 nautical miles into Sargodha and Peshawar, and had air combat at the edge of their endurance and range with the Pakistani pilots. There was this Flight Lieutenant Devia who comes in a mist here, and he does slow speed scissors with an F-104. And eventually, in one of the passes, in the effort to get behind one another, they collide. Flight Lieutenant Amjad, he later on rose to be an Air Vice Marshal. He ejects out of the 104, gets a Sitara Jurat, and Flight Lieutenant Devia, he goes down with the aeroplane. He was given a Paramveer Chakra. So notwithstanding that the Indian Air Force is also a professional air force, Noor Khan had an edge. And once I asked him, I said, sir, he was much too senior to me. I asked him, sir, you won the air war. What happened, the air battle, what happened to the war? Actually, the outcome of the war was a very, very fortunate for us and for India also, a stalemate. We wanted to go across into Kashmir and liberate Kashmir through Gibraltar, failed. India wanted to decimate us as a nation and as a military, they failed. And the likes of Rafiki and Yunus and Aziz Bhatti and Shami, They were the ones who at the tactical level gave their blood, and they were able to not only save Pakistan against an enemy that was 5 times, both in all 3, Army, Navy and Air Force. And that is why the Army Chief very rightly said last evening that the military is fully ready for all conventional and unconventional threats. And we proved it over and over again. 71, we proved it in Kargil, we proved it in the Afghan war. But more importantly, we proved it on 19th February 2019, when the traditions of all these erstwhile giants that I have mentioned, their tales were replicated by smaller people, I mean in terms of junior, they were very junior. Noman Siddiqui, Wing Commander Noman and Siddiqui, Squadron Siddiqui, when Noman shot Abhinandan and Siddiqui shot an Su-30. So we should be very humble in our attitude, thank Allah, but also look forward to the tradition that were left behind by these very, very tall people. And the Pakistan Air Force has done well. The Army has just taken care, not just, but about 10 years back, took care of an insurgency which is very difficult, messy, and which was complex. But the Pakistan Army, supported by the Pakistan Air Force, and had Pakistan Air Force not supported, we would have lost many, many more men in Waziristan and Azerbaijan and all these efforts. So we took care of the insurgency. We have a huge threat today. And when the Army Chief says there can be terrorism, the TTP is not died and it's not out. It can give us problems, but he said we are fully ready, and I entirely agree with him.
Now, talking about that, former DG ISPR, Mr. Asif Ghafoor, said that we gave India a bloody nose, and the Pakistan Armed Forces have made it a habit of giving India a bloody nose, be it on the history or at the present stage. Now, has India learned a lesson from February 27th dogfight?
I will not be arrogant. We should be humble about what we have done. But Asif Ghafoor is absolutely right. We taught them a lesson. What lesson has India learned? Please remember, when in broad daylight, whereas they came in the thick of night and they lobbed their weapons, we say from a distance, they dropped their weapons, they got hold of a cow, of a crow and a few pine trees. Then we went in next day in broad daylight and re-established, and I'm a very proud sky blue warrior. We re-established military deterrence and political deterrence all by a single service application. Please remember, Munib, air power in certain conditions can achieve political and military ends by itself, in certain conditions. It will always need boots on ground to fight their way through, supported by the air, and of course in the south, supported by the maritime forces, by the Pakistan Navy, but we re-established. India did not have the guts to relaunch an effort against this. They did not reciprocate by launching another. What have they learned? That the strategic strikes on ground failed. They have absolutely, General Huda, who oversaw this, he has not given an iota of evidence of these strategic strikes on ground, which we've been clamoring for, asking for in the international press. When they launched the airstrike, they thought they can stay below the nuclear threshold and do anything in the air to teach Pakistan a lesson. They could not. So they have chosen not to relaunch a military effort, a smaller one also. But where is the difficulty? India has got a huge military. It cannot employ, and we also know, we tried once in Kashmir, we tried second time in Kashmir, we tried third time in Kargil. In Kargil, we also found that military application has its severe limitations. But India has even bigger limitations, and that is Nobody, the powers that be, will not allow India to launch a full-fledged war of 10 days to a month. If they don't do that from north to south, they will not generate their full combat power. Case in point, when the parliament was struck, in their case, they tried to launch a full-fledged war. America said, stop, stop, stop. They said, no, we are not stopping. We must decimate Pakistan into many pieces. So what did the Americans do? They launched, they gave a travel advisory to their people in Bangalore, etc. So when the Americans moved out, were moving out, the Europeans also said there is threat, so so the Indians said, please stop, we are not doing anything. So that is the limit of application of military power. Likewise in Bombay, the post-Bombay. If they want to test our resolve within Kashmir, now that is a small area in terms of the airspace above and on the ground. If they bring in 2, 3, 4, 5 corps, we can also take them there and keep the defensive balance in the center and in the south. They will bring in their 2, 3, 4, 5 elite squadrons, fighter squadrons to Kashmir. We can also do that. We have all the air bases in the north. We can also do that. And please remember, I want to give this good news to our viewers. Our Air Force leadership is full. I retired in 2005, so I don't know everything that is classified. But little that I know, by the beginning of next year, and by now Rafales with their Meteors are not operational fully. They've been flying, of course, across the LAC, in Ladakh, etc. But we will have a good antidote to Rafale in the form of J-10, possibly, and the PL-15. And remember, the J-10 is 4.5 generation fighter. And its PL-15 and its AISA radar are supposedly better than that of. So people, the Pakistan Air Force air warriors do not only train hard, and they train with grit, courage and belief, but our leadership is fully cognizant of the threats that India, when Modi said, had we had Rafales, things would have been different. So I think we have not done bad. We should not be arrogant, we should be humble. They are also a professional military. But with a small military, Army, Navy and Air Force, look at Dwarka. I know Admiral Tasneem, he's a great elder and a great friend, Sitara Jurat and Bar in 71. Through a small submarine, commanding a small submarine in the thick of the depths of Arabian Sea, Hangor, and he sunk the Kukri. And the Indians were taken aback. Just because of that, they could not launch a second strike onto Karachi. Because in the first strike, they had left the Karachi refinery aflame. And so like the Army chief said yesterday, the Army is ready, the Air Force is ready, the Navy is ready. The only thing required is the nation must be put together. It doesn't come together all by itself. Political leaders have to do that. Under, like we discussed in some of the programs, one national identity which should be a correct one, a Pakistani Pakistan. One common purpose, one set of vital national interests. These are some of the problems that we have. Otherwise, 6th and 7th September, and tomorrow probably the Navy is going to celebrate. We haven't done bad at all. But I think we should be humble and pray to God. We will do even better.
Air Marshal Retired Masood Akhtar, thank you so much for being with us here in our studio and sharing your experiences about the 1965 war and Pakistan Air Force's ability to give a bloody nose to all the enemies of Pakistan. Thank you so much. And now we shall move on with our other news stories.
Now we have with us Air Commodore retired Dr. Ziaul Haq Shamsi, defense analyst from Islamabad. Thank you for your time. Mr. Shamsi, why do you think India chose the path of aggression in 1965?
Actually, India was perhaps left with no option, and they probably miscalculated the resolve of Pakistan armed forces and the people of Pakistan. And they thought that they will be able to cow down Pakistan armed forces, and that is why perhaps they decided to impose a war on Pakistan. And perhaps their intelligence failed to visualize or report to the government that Pakistan was already prepared for it, especially Pakistan Air Force, which was already prepared for any kind of misadventure by the Indians. And this miscalculation, whenever war breaks out, it is the outcome of certain miscalculations by the leadership which gives a go-ahead for the war. And India did make that mistake in 1965 and perhaps again in 2019.
Right. Mr. Shamsi, how did Pakistan manage to defeat an army many times bigger and better equipped at that time?
Yeah, I think a very, very pertinent question. Preparation, initiative, courage. Because Pakistan Armed Forces decided to take the war into enemy land, which the Indians were not expecting. Because general rule is 1:3, and India was already 4 times larger. So they thought that they will be able to cow down the Pakistan Armed Forces because they are numerically superior. And at that time, they had the equipment also and wherewithal to undertake that kind of operation, which they thought they have carefully planned. But this is where they made the mistake, because when they crossed the international border, they were surprised that the Pakistan was prepared and more than their expectation. The response was very swift, particularly from the Air Force, because Air Force, the way it came in for the support of Pakistan Army, it actually impeded the advance of Indian Army in Chavanda and the Cham sector and in the Lahore zone as well. So that is where India failed to, as you say, the Chinese sage Sun Tzu, that you must know your enemy. And if you know the enemy, you need not to worry about the outcome of the battle. India did not know Pakistan as a prepared enemy, whereas Pakistan knew what India would do and what India can do. This is very important, and that is why Pakistan, being numerically inferior as far as the number was concerned, and we were outnumbered in every department. I mean, be it Pakistan Army, be it Pakistan Air Force, be it Pakistan Navy. But the way we performed and outperformed, that was because of the leadership's offensive mindset. We decided to take the war into their land, which they did not expect. They thought it will be a walkover and they will have evening tea in Lahore Gymkhana. So that is where I think they miscalculated, and they don't have a face to show. Even after so many decades of this war, we very proudly celebrate this day because we proved equal to the task.
Right. Mr. Shamsi, now do we have heroes like Rafiki, Sisal and Yunus in the PF right now?
Wow. Do you have any doubt on that?
No, we don't have any doubt.
That's what I'm coming to. February 19 is not too far back in the history, isn't it? Broad daylight, within 10 minutes, 2 fighter jets downed, isn't it? One of them falling inside Pakistani controlled territory, and the pilot was captured and gracefully returned after necessary documentation, isn't it? So Pakistan, alhamdulillah, and armed forces in general and Pakistan Air Force in particular leads the way. Actually, whenever Pakistan's airspace is challenged or the international boundary is challenged. And we did that in 65, and we've done that, alhamdulillah, in 2019 as well. That because this is how you build your credibility. The psychological ascendancy which Pakistan Air Force gained over 4 times larger Indian Air Force in 1965 is maintained till this date. And that is why in 2019, when Prime Minister of Pakistan announced that India, if carries out any misadventure, Pakistan will not think, it will act. And that is what we did. Broad daylight on 27th morning, whereas a night before India had carried out the airspace violation and undertook an unsuccessful airstrike in Balakot area, destroying only 4 or 5 trees over there. Whereas when Pakistan's Prime Minister had warned them, but they did not take him seriously, and they thought that these are mere rhetoric words. But when the Pakistan Air Force chief said that, sir, we are ready, and he got a go-ahead, and very next day, broad daylight, 10 o'clock in the morning, within 10 minutes, 2 aeroplanes are down. And now India does not have a face. I mean, just claiming that they have also downed an F-16, whereas the Americans did their countdown in Pakistan. And recently, I think Christine Fair has also told in India that no, you were not able to shoot down their F-16. It's a false claim. Whereas we were able to show the debris of the downed aircraft and the pilot also. So nation should not have any doubt that Rafiqis and Alams and Shabirs and yours are reborn or not. The raw talent is available throughout the Pakistan. What Pakistan Air Force does it, that recruits them on merit, trains them with whatever resources we have, and polishes them and hones them into Rafiqis and Alams and yours, and that is why we have Hassans and Nomans even in 2021, 2019.
Right, Mr. Shamsi, now doctrinal implications in contemporary times and regional air war possibilities?
I think it's an ongoing process. Doctrinal changes, they keep on evolving. But one thing is for sure, that air power is an offensive weapon, and it has to be employed offensively. This is what Pakistan Air Force taught the world in 1965, being smaller but carried out an offensive defense strategy and proved its worth. Whereas in 1989, the Gulf War I in Operation Desert Storm, the same was repeated by Allied and NATO forces against almost not comparable air force, that is Iraqi Air Force. And within first 100 hours, air dominance was achieved by them. And since then, air power leading the way or leading the future war has become the mantra. Whereas Pakistan Air Force had proved it back in 1965. And the same was repeated, alhamdulillah, on February 27, 2019. So it's a continuous process with the advancement in technology. The air strategy keeps evolving. But remember, air power is an offensive weapon. It cannot be deployed by passive manner.
Right, Air Commander, retired Dr. Ziaul Haq Shamsi, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. In India, thousands of farmers have gathered in Haryana to pressure the government to repeal controversial agriculture laws. Police say about 4,000 farmers are participating in the rally in Karnal district. Farmers say they will march to the mini secretariat and occupy streets. Authorities imposed restrictions on gatherings and snapped internet services ahead of the protest. Meanwhile, hundreds of police were deployed amid a maze of barricades. A nationwide strike is planned on 27th of September to protest against centre's law, which farmers say will jeopardize their livelihoods. Another development, the farmer leaders will hold talks with the district administration later today. However, several rounds of talks between the farmers and government have failed to end the 10-month protest. Israeli fighter jets have launched air raids on the Gaza Strip, violating the May ceasefire with Hamas yet again. In a tweet, Israeli army claimed to have struck a military compound and a rocket manufacturing site belonging to Hamas. It said the attack in the vicinity of Khan Yunis city was in response to alleged incendiary balloons launched from the Strip. Palestinian media said the Israeli F-16s bombed 2 sites with missiles and completely destroyed citizens' property. It said lately the Israeli military's F-16 jets are flying intensively in the airspace of the besieged strip. France has called on Iran to provide a full explanation about the presence of undeclared nuclear material in the country. A French Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Paris fully supports the UN nuclear watchdog's efforts to clarify the state of Tehran's nuclear program. At a press briefing, the officials added that Iran must immediately resume full cooperation with the agency. Paris also urged Tehran to confirm implementation of temporary measures under a bilateral deal with the agency. Earlier, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said the watchdog's political use can prompt a different response from Tehran. He said negotiations on the revival of the nuclear deal will resume, but they must guarantee Iran's interests. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned the terrorist attack that targeted security forces in Iraq's Kirkuk governorate. 13 Iraqi security troops were killed in the attack. The OIC stressed the need to support Iraq's efforts in combating terrorism and violent extremism. Earlier, ISIS claimed responsibility for an overnight attack on a security post near the Iraqi city of Kirkuk. Myanmar's shadow government has declared a people's defensive war against the country's military, which seized power in a coup on February 1st. In a speech, the acting president of National Unity Government, Dua Lashila, urged all the citizens to revolt against the rule of the military terrorist in every corner of the country. He called on the exiled government's People's Defense Force to strike every pillar of the junta ruling mechanism and to protect the lives of the citizens. Dua Lashila also urged local administrators working under the junta to resign immediately. Advocacy groups say the military has killed over 1,000 civilians in a crackdown on dissent so far. South Korea has reportedly test-fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile, becoming the first non-nuclear weapons country to develop such a capability. Officials say the underwater ejection tests were carried out from the Dosan and Changho submarine. It is a locally developed 3,000-ton class submarine fitted with 6 vertical launching tubes. The missile has a range of around 500 kilometers and is believed to be a variant of the country's Yunmo-2B ballistic missile. Authorities say the weapon system will be mass-produced for deployment after a round of additional tests. Mexico has reported over 300 daily COVID-19 deaths and more than 5,000 infections in the last 24 hours. Globally, the COVID-19 caseload has topped 221 million, while the death toll has reached over 4.57 million. Details in the following report. The UK has announced $7.5 billion over more for National Health Service to cover additional costs from the pandemic over the next 6 months. Europe too is evaluating data on a booster dose for Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for people 16 years of age and older. The outbreak is in the hard-hit western suburbs of Australia's largest city, has spurred a spike in vaccination rate. Meanwhile, New Zealand is also finalizing arrangements to procure more vaccines.
We are now finalizing arrangements that secure additional supply in September. This will enable us to maintain our extraordinary vaccination rates throughout September until our bulk deliveries land in October.
In Philippines, Manila residents have welcomed the announcement of a relaxation of restrictions by the government. However, Vietnam has extended curbs and jailed a person for 5 years for breaking strict quarantine rules and spreading the virus. India is bracing for a third wave as markets saw massive crowds of shoppers ahead of festive season.
This is a very auspicious festival in Maharashtra. That's why public has stepped out of houses to shop. They're following precautions like wearing masks, following distancing norms. I agree there is crowd at some places, congested places, but people are following precautions.
China has urged the US to be a supporter rather than a saboteur of international cooperation in the origins tracing of the coronavirus. In the US, the national debate over vaccine requirements have created a fraught situation for the first responders who are dying in large numbers. Cuba has become the first country in the world to vaccinate children from the age of 2 against COVID-19 using homegrown jabs not recognized by the World Health Organization. The Chilean health regulator has approved the Sinovac vaccine for use in children over 6 years of age. Pakistan has reported 98 deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the tally of fatalities has reached 26,330. It said over 3,300 people contracted the virus overnight. The ministry said more than 92,000 cases are active, while over 5,400 are critical. Health officials say the country's caseload has crossed 1.18 million. Meanwhile, over 1,067,000 people have recovered. At least 11 people in the Indian state of Kerala have contracted a deadly brain-damaging Nipah virus. The rising infection tally comes just one day after a young boy succumbed to the illness. Kerala's health minister said the infected patients include the dead boy's family and the healthcare workers who treated him. She said the contact list of the deceased boy has gone up to 250. Authorities have set up a special laboratory to test for Nipah, which is a bat-borne virus with a high mortality rate. The virus with no vaccine can cause brain inflammation and is on the WHO's research and development priority pathogen list. Bolivian rescuers have retrieved the body of a U.S. climber from the country's second highest mountain. According to reports, Daniel Granberg died as a result of high-altitude pulmonary distress. The rescuers braved the fierce conditions of Elimani Mountain to retrieve the body of 24-year-old climber. Granberg was at an altitude of over 6,000 meters on the second day of his trek on the mountain when he died. Nevada Elimani is the highest peak in the Cordillera Real, with 3 summits rising to over 6,000 meters. In the U.S., Hurricane Ida has left widespread power outages and damaged homes in the country's southern states. Meanwhile, officials have warned of new thunderstorms and heavy rains in the region. President Joe Biden will visit New York and New Jersey today to view the destruction wrought by last week's storm. In Louisiana, more than 500,000 people are still without power, which officials say is unlikely to be restored until the next few weeks. Over in New York, Governor Kathy Hochul said the Hurricane Ida caused damage of more than $50 million in the state. Meanwhile, the U.S. Coast Guard says it was probing nearly 350 reports of oil spills in and along the Gulf Coast in the wake of the hurricane. Ida, one of the most powerful hurricanes ever to strike the U.S. Gulf Coast, has left at least 57 dead in the country. NASA says its Perseverance Mars rover has successfully collected its first rock sample for scientists. Sealed in an airtight, ultra-clean tube, the sample is an important milestone in a multi-billion-dollar effort. The breakthrough will prove critical in answering the question of whether life exists on Mars. Rover's successful maneuver comes after the first attempt failed last month when a weak rock on the crater floor crumbled to pieces. Experts have likened the achievement to the first samples of rock taken from the moon. China has launched a new Earth observation satellite. The country's space agency said the Gaofen 502 was launched off the back of a Long March 4C rocket. China's Space Administration said the satellite has successfully entered orbit. It is equipped with hyperspectral observational devices tasked with monitoring air, water and environments. The deployment marks the 387th flight of the Long March carrier rocket. The UK has postponed the start of post-Brexit border checks on goods going to Northern Ireland, saying it seeks new talks with the EU. Brexit Minister David Frost said the UK government would continue to trade on the current basis, maintaining grace periods. He says a standstill would provide space for potential further discussions with the EU over the two sides' deep differences on Brexit. He did not set a new end date for the grace period, some of which had been set to finish on 30th of September. Relations between the UK and EU have soared over trade arrangements for Northern Ireland. It is the only part of the UK that has a land border with the 27-nation bloc. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been hit by a stone thrown by protesters during an election campaign stop. Trudeau had called a snap election in mid-August in the hope of gaining a majority government for his party. But his campaign has been disrupted by demonstrations against COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other restrictions. He was returning to his bus after a visit for his campaign when he was struck by small stones. However, he escaped the incident uninjured. Earlier, Trudeau was forced to cancel an election rally after a crowd of angry protesters ambushed the event. A lost Humboldt penguin was rescued by the members of a Chile's fisheries body in small coastal city of Quinacral. A group of tourists spotted the weak and disorientated penguin on the coast and was taken to the veterinary clinic of Caldera for care. Later on, the team took the penguin to Pan de Azúcar National Park for its release. The Humboldt penguins are considered a vulnerable species and have undergone extreme population size fluctuation. According to researchers, there are an estimated 2,500 to 10,000 mature individual Humboldt penguins left in the wild. They are found in the wild in coastal Chile and Peru and have a life expectancy of 15 to 20 years. American actor Michael K. Williams has been found dead in his New York apartment. Although this has not been officially confirmed, but local media quoted law enforcement sources saying that Williams died from a suspected drug overdose. The 54-year-old actor, who was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards, had openly discussed his struggles with drugs over the years. Williams was best known for starring in HBO drama series The Wire. Asia-Pacific markets are trading mixed as investors remain cautious over imposition of curbs due to the rise in COVID-19 cases. Stocks in mainland China added nearly 1.5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained nearly 1%. Japan's Nikkei 225 also rose close to 1%. However, sales Kospi shed over 0.5%. Shares in Australia are trading flat. For the weather updates, we have Munib Hamid with us.
Welcome to the weather forecast. Now we're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be sunny, with temperatures rising to 38 degrees Celsius, while in Amsterdam, sunny weather is expected, while temperatures are steady at 26. Now, if we head to Ankara, there is also sunny weather with temperatures at 24. Now moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 16 degrees Celsius with partly cloudy sky. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, there will be thunderstorm with temperatures around 30. In Beijing, temperatures are at 27, accompanied with thin layer of clouds in the sky, while Beirut will also experience sunny weather with temperatures at 31. Meanwhile, Berliners will experience temperatures at 22, accompanied with a thin layer of clouds in the sky. Now heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with temperatures at 35 degrees Celsius with clear sunny sky in the forecast. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 18 with sunny weather today. In Islamabad, temperatures are at 34 with thunderstorm, while in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 29 degrees Celsius with thunderstorm in the forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Munib. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.